Caravan of migrants currently waiting to cross the US-Mexico border isn't just testing the US border. It's also putting a major strain on Mexico. An estimated 5,000 migrants are currently staying in the border town of Tijuana. Most of them eventually plan to seek asylum in the US, but for now, the city says it's spending around $27,000 a day just to provide shelter to the migrants. The migrants' presence has sparked a bit of backlash. Last week, hundreds of Tijuana citizens held a protest against the caravan, and the official point of entry between Tijuana and San Ysidro in the US was briefly shuttered Sunday after some members of the caravan attempted to rush the border. The area can ill afford more disruptions like that. That crossing processes 120,000 commuter vehicles per day. But the caravan has also received support from volunteer groups and some government officials in Mexico. Polling company Parametria notes a plurality of Mexican citizens approved allowing migrants into the country. The White House is reportedly angling for a deal with the incoming Mexican government that would keep the migrants in Mexico while their asylum claims are being processed in the US. Mexican officials have denied reports that a deal has been reached. Mexico's new president-elect has been forging a largely positive relationship with President Trump, so it's not impossible to see them reaching some sort of agreement. But a deal with the US could spark political blowback in Mexico. A Pew poll from last year found nearly 2/3 of all Mexicans had unfavorable views of the US.
A group of migrants from Central America who attempted to storm the Mexico border near Tijuana into California will be deported. Mexican authorities said the 500 migrants rounded up on November 25th tried to violently and illegally breach a Mexico-U.S. border fence. The migrants were part of a caravan of thousands who traveled 2,500 miles with the goal of seeking asylum in the U.S. Video footage shows dozens running towards the border fence as U.S. border agents fired tear gas to stop them. They reportedly crossed the international border to try to pressure the U.S. into hearing their asylum claims. The migrants are primarily from Honduras, but also from Guatemala and El Salvador, where they are reportedly fleeing violence. President Donald Trump, however, has vowed not to allow the migrants into the U.S. Some migrants carried hand-painted American and Honduran flags, chanting, "We are not criminals, we are international workers." For Global One, I'm Juliette Vara.
This week, the media will plaster the airwaves with one photo of a Hispanic mom and her 2 kids running away from tear gas at the U.S. border. But what they won't show you are all the videos of these same migrants violently assaulting border agents and trying to tear down our border fence. So since they won't tell you the truth, I will. Hey guys, I'm Brittany Hughes. Welcome back to Reality Check on MRC TV. Now, this is about the only photo that the media will be circulating for the next few days, so gear up for it. Prepare for another endless round of left-wing talking heads preaching about the evils of the Trump administration and our border security for daring to tear gas innocent women and children fleeing violence. We'll hear about how right-wingers are basically Nazis for refusing to open our borders up to hordes of refugees clamoring for sanctuary, and all of these sermons will be backed up by this one image, because it's all they've got. So for any of you with your heads still buried in the sand over there, let me dispel this little myth. Here's what the border between Tijuana and San Diego really looked like this weekend. Hundreds of wannabe illegal aliens bum-rushed a border fence and either tried to tear it down or just climb over it. One group actually managed to rip a section out of the ground. When that ultimately didn't work, they started hurling bottles and rocks at U.S. border security. Only after the mob had broken through the fence and agents were getting hit with projectiles did they bring out the tear gas, just to keep from being overrun. You know, as any other sovereign nation on planet Earth would do. And you know, speaking of planet Earth, who on it, in their right mind, thinks that the way to ask a country for asylum is to show up with a mob and tear down its border fence and assault its people? Who thinks that's about asylum? When you apply to come into a country legally with the intent to assimilate into their culture and become a peaceful and productive member of that society, that is called immigration. When you show up without permission, storm their borders and assault their people, that's called invasion, and you deserve to be treated as an invader. This is not a difficult concept to understand. Now, those who traveled with this caravan have had multiple chances to do things the right way. They could have applied for asylum the minute they left their home country. They could have gone to a U.S. embassy and applied for asylum once they reached Mexico. In fact, Mexico even offered them asylum there, and they refused. They could have shown up to an official U.S. port of entry and asked for asylum, and they didn't. Instead, they chose to attack a border fence and assault our law enforcement. So clearly this is not just about escaping some craptastic neighborhood in Honduras. It's about getting to America regardless of whether you've got to beat somebody over the head with a rock to do it. And now, thanks to all of this nonsense, Border Patrol has had to close a legal port of entry into San Diego, meaning that those who legally work in the city and commute from Mexico can't get in. So thanks for that. So I tell you what, for all you liberal bleeding hearts out there who haven't proposed the first plan as to how all of these people are going to live or work or feed their families if we were to fling open the doors, but who have found all the time in the world to criticize this administration for trying to protect its own people, here's a thought. How about you head on down to any Central American country, break through their border, and start hurling rocks and bottles at their agents and see what happens. Free tip, their prisons aren't nearly as nice as ours. In the meantime, God bless the men and women who put their lives on the line every day at our border to keep our ungrateful nation safe. Because a country without borders is not a country at all. And that's your Reality Check, America. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page.
Tear gas and tensions at the border. Hundreds of migrants tried to cross into the U.S. Sunday. That led to the brief closure of a major port of entry between U.S. and Mexico. John Lawrence reports.
A battle at the border. About 500 migrants tried to enter the U.S. illegally Sunday, stopped by federal and local authorities in Mexico. In some cases, tear gas was used to disperse the crowd.
It was very scary. I mean, I just, I cross often, and this is the first time I've just been so afraid that I may just stay in America. No, but I mean, it is what it is.
President Trump tweeting this weekend that migrants seeking asylum will not be allowed into the United States until their claims are individually approved in court.
It's a humanitarian crisis. They can't afford to take care of those people and feed those people and have them used as a waiting room, as this president has had wanted them to do.
Mr. Trump even threatened to close our southern border.
Of course, we don't want to see the border closed, but you know what? Safety of our nation comes first.
The rush of migrants led authorities to suspend all crossings at the largest border checkpoint between San Diego and Tijuana for a few hours Sunday. More than 36 people were arrested at the border. Mexican officials say the migrants who tried to enter the U.S. Sunday will be deported.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me.
And why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
The president has called it an assault on the U.S. border. It is absolutely not. It's nowhere near the U.S. border.
President is focusing some of his biggest lies on this caravan.
Lies about a migrant caravan.
He doubles down on immigration. We saw that with the caravan, which he lied about. It's not true, as we all know now.
Even the whole caravan thing, we know the caravan is, they're 1,100 miles or 1,000 miles away from the United States. They're not knocking at our doors.
And one of the lies that it tells now, without any facts, is that this caravan is filled with dangerous people and they're going to storm the border. And citizens need to understand, we are trying to tell them facts and what's true. They are selling you a political view which will include lies if it serves their ends.
They're telling us that the single most grave threat to America is a bunch of poor, impoverished, broke, hungry refugees 1,000 miles away.
But there were ultimately 42 arrests of individuals. And again, as I mentioned, the vast majority of those were adult males. The group immediately started throwing rocks and debris at our agents, taunting the agents. Once our agents were assaulted, and the numbers started growing. We had 2 or 3 agents at a time initially facing hundreds of people at a time. They deployed tear gas to protect themselves and to protect the border. So at least 3 agents were actually struck by rocks, but they were in tactical gear, so their helmets and their shields and their bulletproof vest actually protected them from the rocks. We did have a few vehicles that were damaged, some windows, and quite a few dents, but none of the agents were seriously injured. We were able to manage this and effectively control this, but I want to be clear that all of our agents on a daily basis are fully employed. We had to bring in several hundred additional Border Patrol agents from around the country, several hundred additional CBP officers from around the country. That's affecting our operations in other areas. But the fact that no one made it across the border or past our defenses, I would say we were adequately staffed. But it was not without a cost.